Hey guys, I'm so glad you're here. This is video 4 in my Photoshop Training for Photographers series. And in this video, we are going to cover layer masks as well as adjustment layers. These are powerful tools that will help you create images exactly how you want them to be. So stick around, this is going to be a great lesson. Okay, thank you guys for being here. In this video, I'm going to start with layer masks because layer masks are so very important inside Photoshop, and there's lots of different areas we can use them in. We will use them in adjustment layers in just a second when I go over adjustment layers, but we also can use them with specific layers inside of one image. And so I'm going to first show you about layer masks so that you kind of can get a feel and understand of how to use those. So on this image right here, we have a sign and it's got just this white sky behind it. And what I want to do is I want to get this blue sky to shine through. Now before I go any further, I want to remind you, if you've been doing this course, you can download these images off of unsplash.com. And so they are there for you to download so you can work right alongside with me. I honestly believe as we're doing the work together, you actually learn more. So go ahead and download these two images so you can work right alongside me. Again, the links are in the blog post or the show notes. But the first thing we're going to do is we are going to drag the sky over onto the image of the sign. Now the first thing you'll notice is that all we see is the sky. And that is because it is the topmost layer. Its opacity is set to 100%. So what I want to do is I actually want the sky layer to be below the sign layer. And I can't simply drag it because currently the sign layer is set to be my background, but it also has this lock icon, so nothing's going to go below it. So if I unlock it, it changes it from my background layer. So that means I can now drag things below it. So if I grab onto the sky and drag it below, we now have the sign above with the sky layer below. Now let me select the sign layer, and what probably the most intuitive or the thing you might think of the most would be just to grab the eraser tool, which is the E key. I have my opacity set to 100% and just coming through here and starting to erase the image. Now there's a problem with this, and the main problem is that I am being destructive with my image. And what that means is, let's say I go in here and I accidentally do something like that. In order to fix that, I have to go back. I have to undo. And let's say I don't notice that I've done that and I move through all of these and I continue editing. I have to undo all of these different things to be able to fix that issue that I made. That's the problem with destructive editing. Also, if I was to save this image and come back a day later or a week later or whenever, and I've made a mistake, it's too late. I can't undo. I can't fix what I have done. So we do not want to edit destructively. We want to edit in a way, we want to edit in a way that allows us to fix or adjust any edit we make. And that's going to be done through what is called a layer mask. So down here in the layers palette, you'll see this icon that says add layer mask. Now with my proper layer selected, which is the sign layer, if I click on this, you'll see it adds this layer mask right here. Now the mask currently is set to white, which means it's allowing everything to show through. If I change that to black, okay, so let's say I change my foreground color to black, I get my paint bucket tool and I drop it on my layer mask, everything goes black on the mask, which means it is hiding everything on this specific layer, allowing the layer below it to shine through. Now we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to paint certain areas black, because then it starts to allow only those areas we paint to be able to shine through. So let's go to my paintbrush tool, okay? So that's the B key to go to the brush tool. And I can start to, let's make my opacity 100%, and I can now start to paint in the sky. Now, the nice thing about this, well, let's notice a few things. First off, you'll notice that over here on the mask, we have black. The black area is what is letting this sky shine through, or a lower layer, to be able to see it through this top layer. And the white is still showing me what's on this layer. So this still may be hard to see. So if I right-click on the layers palette, I can actually make my thumbnails larger. So I can see exactly what's being masked and what is not being masked. The white area is not being masked, meaning that I'm seeing it. The black area is currently being masked. Okay? So if I went over here and switched my foreground color so I'm painting white, I can begin to get rid of what I have already done here. So let me really quick, by using the brush tool, let me really quick mask all of the areas I want to let the sign come through. Okay, and I could come through here and just kind of do a generic, really quick edit. And then to fine tune, I could zoom in. And I'm going to want a harder brush. And remember, I bring up this menu by right-clicking, because I'm going to want to come in here and do right next to the sign. Okay, so I'm going to click right here. And one tip is, if you have straight lines that you're trying to draw on, I clicked right there. And if I come down here and I hold the Shift key down and click down here, it creates a straight line with that mask. So when I'm working with areas like this that don't need kind of a feathering or working through that area, I just need these straight lines. I can come here and just click. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that one. Hold it down and then click. Go back here, hold it down, click. Okay, and then this rounded area is going to get a little bit more tricky through here. So I'm going to go with a bigger brush, and I'm just going to kind of come in through here. Whoops, let's go smaller. Whoops, boy, I'm undoing too much. Let's go right through here and just kind of paint this out. Okay, so let me zoom back out so you can see that. So if I hide this layer, if I hide this layer, you can see that I have now selected the sign by itself, and I did that simply by erasing. Now if I click here on the mask, I can go down here to the eyeball tool and I can hide and bring the mask back so I can see what I've done. If I wanted to see this mask large on my main screen here, I could hold down the Option or Alt key. Option key for a Mac, Alt key for a PC, and bring it up here. And what I can see is there's some areas that I haven't really done a good job with. So I could just come in here with my brush and just kind of finish those off really quick. Okay. All right. And then same thing, just hold that Option or Alt key and click on it again. Now you'll notice that the mask is selected. If I click over here, my mask is no longer selected. And so if I come over here and start to use my brush, I'm actually painting on my main image. I'm actually painting black. So you have to be careful with that. You need to make sure that the mask is selected. And if you have your palette set up like we did for this course, it will give you your properties palette right here, and you'll know when you're clicked off it because it doesn't give you your mask properties down through here. Okay, so be aware of that, but you can also see those little lines appearing and disappearing. So masks, you can see, is hiding this portion of the image. Now, to get rid of this mask, let's say I don't want it anymore, I can delete layer mask. I can just right click on it and delete it. It goes away. Or I can actually drag it to the trash can icon. Now, when you drag it to the trash icon, you get presented with two things: delete it or apply it. If I apply it to the image, what it's done is it's become destructive. So now there's no fixing what I've done. So you don't want to do that. If you wanted to delete it, drag it, and you would just hit delete, and it would then delete it, but it would leave the image how it was. All right, and then the last thing I want to show you is, let's say with a mask, see how I've messed up right through here. If I change my color to white, so instead of painting with black, I'm now painting with white. If I come back in here, I can undo what I've done. I can hit the X key to go back to black, and I can try it again. All right, so do you see? This is why painting with a mask becomes so great, because I can come back and fine-tune anything that I need to later. And I can hit the brush. I can hit the X key, and I can keep going back and forth and back and forth to get it exactly how I want it to be. And you'll notice as you start using masks a lot, you'll notice that your initial approval, or what you initially thought was great in a mask, ends up not being so great. And so you're going to want to fix it later. One last thing, and we're not going to go over this. I'm going to go over it in my next video, which covers selection tools. But you can make a selection and then create a layer mask from that selection. So in essence, I could have, let me delete this layer here. I could have gotten a selection tool and selected this sign, and then created a mask with that selected, and it would have instantly masked out the portions I wanted. And so, in fact, in my next video, I will use this same sign picture so you can see that happen. Okay, so do we kind of understand a layer mask? Do you understand that it basically what it does is it shows or hides specific data or pixels in the image below? So let's get rid of these, and let's now move into these images right here. From these images is we're going to learn about adjustment layers. And basically, if you go up into your image adjustments, you'll notice that you have the ability to make adjustments to an image. So if I look at this image, I want to drop the contrast on it. Okay, so if I click on brightness contrast, it brings up this dialog box, and I can take this and I can slide my contrast down, and boom, I've dropped my contrast. Now the one problem with that is I am changing the pixels of this image, changing them in a way that I can't fix later if I actually don't like what I've done. I'm stuck with it unless I undo a ton of things that I've done. But if I've saved it and come back to it tomorrow, it's too late. Those things are permanently a part of this image. And so what we want to do is we want to learn to use layers to make changes to our image. And the reason we want to do that is because when we use layers, we always can go back and either adjust what we've already adjusted, make a change to what we've changed, or even get rid of something that we've done so that we can redo or refix something that we've done in the past. And so adjustment layers are just that, a way to make an adjustment except to make it on a layer. And if you've set your palettes and menus up like we did when we first started this course, or if you're following along with us in this course, then your screen is going to look like mine. And down here we have set up all of our adjustment layers. And when I click on one, let's say this first one, it creates a layer with the brightness and contrast options. And those are going to be found right here in the Properties tab. You can also create an adjustment layer by clicking on this round half black, half white circle. And here is the brightness and contrast. And if I select that, it creates an additional adjustment layer. So we can either click on it here, or we can go into this palette right here. But if we don't have our properties open, we're not going to be able to see the options to make the changes. So if you do not have this window open, you can simply go up into, Window, Properties, to make sure that you see this screen right here. Now we don't need two of these, so I'm going to delete one of them. But this these properties for the adjustment layer of brightness and contrast match what appeared in that dialog box up here when I went to Image, Adjustment, Brightness, Contrast. You'll notice I have a brightness slider and a contrast slider. Down here I have a brightness slider and a contrast slider. Okay, so we can do the very same things. I can click on Auto, and it will go through and it will try to figure out what is best for this image. Okay, that took forever. I don't know why that took so long. Okay, so it increased my contrast, which I'm like, whoa, hold down on the contrast, and it darkened the image. I can do undo to get rid of that. Let's just say my personal preference is to decrease the contrast, and so I can do that by simply dropping the slider here. I can also do that by, I can also drop the brightness or raise the brightness here. So I just want to talk about a few, before we move on to some of these other images, I want to talk about a few of the adjustment layers that we're gonna go over. Now there are a lot of adjustment layers, and we're not going to go over all of them here, but some of the main ones are brightness, contrast. Another main one is levels. So let me bring up a levels adjustment layer, and I'm going to hide the brightness and contrast layer. Now levels also lets us adjust the brightness and contrast, but it brings up a histogram, and it allows us to change our black point. So I can make more of the pixels pure black. I can also make more of the pixels pure white. So in a histogram, the mountains show me where the data lies, or where the amount of pixels lie in the image. So you can see the greater amount of pixels are towards the lighter side than the darker side. These are going to be my midtones. I can make my midtones lighter, or I can make my midtones darker. By moving it higher, a greater amount of the pixels move into the darker area. That's why it may seem a little intuitive or not intuitive in how I'm dragging. If I drag my midtone slider down here, a greater amount of the pixels are up in the highlight area. So you could come in here and you could tweak your image. I could adjust my highlights so I could bring out a little bit more brightness into the shadows right through there. Okay. Another thing you can do, let me delete that layer by hitting the delete key. Let me go to a levels layer again. Something else you can do is you can use these eyedroppers. So I can click on this eyedropper, and I could say this right here is pure white. And what it will do is it will shift everything to make where I clicked pure white. Now that's of course not pure white, but up in here, if I wanted to say her sweater was pure white, I could click there. I could click on this one and say, let's see, do we have a black point? We could maybe say her hair is black. Click there. It's now kind of handling this for me. I don't use levels a lot. You can use them if you like, but I don't use them a lot. So that can be a personal choice. Let me hide that one, and we are going to go to a curves layer. Okay, and if you'll notice down here, the curves layer, and I'm going to make this actually, let me click right there, and let me make this bigger. So I'll just use this little arrow down here, right here. So this as well, this also brings up my histogram, where you can again see that in the lighter tones, I have more pixels than I do in the darker tones. So as I click on this curve, I can make adjustments. I create points, and I am raising the brightness of my bright pixels, or I am darkening the brighter pixels. Now you can see that the whole curve is bending here. So if I wanted to bring up the darkness, if I wanted to bring up the lightness in my dark curves as well, what I've done is I've darkened my light pixels, I've brightened my dark pixels, but in essence what I've done is I've brought my midpoint closer together, and I've made my image have less contrast. Does that make sense? So I've created this kind of upside down or inversed S right here. So I've darkened my bright pixels and I've lightened my dark pixels, which kind of creates this flat look to my image. Let me undo those changes. The opposite of that, or a way to create more contrast, is to brighten your bright pixels and darken your dark pixels. And that creates more contrast. I could also come in here and just simply raise the brightness of my midtones, clicking here to bring my dark tones and my light tones back where they were. Okay, so my midtones now I can raise or lower. So the curves is a very powerful adjustment layer. It's a very powerful panel. If you're not familiar with it, if you don't feel comfortable with it, don't even worry about using it. But it is a good one to at least be familiar with. All right, the next one down here is going to be vibrance and saturation. So vibrance and saturation basically do the same thing. You are saturating some colors and unsaturating all. The difference is saturation will move all of the colors and saturate everything, either more or less. I can saturate or desaturate. So if you kind of like that muted tone look, this is a great panel to go to. The difference, though, is vibrance. What it will do is it will only saturate the colors that are the least saturated currently in the image, and it will also try to retain skin tone. So if I drag this up, you'll notice in some of the colors we are getting saturation, but you'll notice that the skin tones are remaining where they're at. So if I drop it, same type of thing happens, except our skin tones start to lose a little bit of their tone as well. So if you're doing a picture of people, vibrance is going to be the slider you want to use. Basically, it's moving the vibrance, or the saturation would be the right word, of the tones that are the least saturated. All right, the next one is there's the hue saturation. Let me hide these ones so they're not affecting it. Hue saturation allows you to change the colors of color. Hue is color, so you get to change the color of colors, and you could choose, whoops, not there. You could choose if I wanted to adjust the color of red, I could do it. Let's say I wanted to adjust yellows. So look at his little band right there. If I wanted to adjust the color of his band, I could do that. Now there's yellow in the grass, and there's also yellow in their skin tones, so I can start to change that. I can also change the saturation of my yellows, so I can desaturate them to take away that yellow band, or I can oversaturate them. Okay? I can brighten up a specific color. Notice the yellow is brightening, or I can darken a specific color. So you can come in here and select your specific color, or you can do it to all the colors together, however you want to do that one. Hue and saturation, that's a very powerful panel that we will talk more about. Color balance, this is one that you will use all the time. So this is going to be one where you want to color correct or color balance specific images. You can add cyan or red to images, add magenta or green, add yellow or blue. So as you add one, you remove the other. All right, let me see if there's any of these other ones that I want to go over. I don't think there is. So let's just leave it with those right there. So let me delete all of those, and let's go to this image right here. This image I want to add some contrast to. So let's come down here to our brightness and contrast. I can increase contrast in this image, and I can also brighten it up. Now, when I increased contrast, it didn't do very much to it. So I could actually come in here to a curve, and I can really start to affect it more. And remember, brightening the brights and darkening the darks creates that contrast. So can you see how I'm really adding contrast to start to bring the couple out? If I hold down the Option or Alt key while I click on the last eyeball of the background, it hides all the layers above. Now, I'm going to need to pull the color back, aren't I? So let's go to Color Balance, and let's remove some of that red. I got a lot of red in there. And let's remove some of my yellow. Okay, and I can even do it again. So I can stack layers on top of each other. Let's remove some of that red. Let's remove some of that yellow and just kind of get it, and it's starting to look a little blue. We don't want that, or a little too cyan. Right there. And then let's just add a little bit more brightness to it. Okay, so I kind of have a usable image there, right? A little bit of a usable image. This one was really just to show you how they can use. That image is a pretty tough image to try to adjust. let me go to this image right here. So this is a darker image. So let's say I want to brighten this up. I'm going to go ahead and use brightness and just kind of raise that brightness right there. Okay, but let's talk about something. Let's say, for example, I wanted to keep these pavers a little bit dark. Now you'll notice every time you create an adjustment layer, it creates a layer mask. So I have a layer mask currently selected for my brightness. And what I can do is I could paint directly on this layer mask black so that it does not let this brightness layer affect some of the pixels below. Or in essence, the background layer will start to shine through. So let's hit B for the brush tool. Okay, I'm gonna go to 100% opacity, and I'm just gonna start to paint black in there. Now you can tell I'm painting black because my foreground color is black, but look at my layer mask. You can see now that the black part is not letting this brightness affect this image below. So now you can see that I have got this where these pavers are darker and their feet are lighter. Now I did a terrible job with that, so let me undo that. And let me just drop my opacity to 20%. And when I'm in the brush tool, if I hit the number 2 key, it will drop the opacity automatically to 20%. I'm going to make my brush big, and I want it to be very soft, so my hardness is at 0. And I can just start feathering in this darkness. Can you see that? So now, let me make that thumbnail larger. You can see that on this layer mask, with this, the brightness is not affecting this portion of the image as much as it is affecting this portion up here. And the reason is because I've used a mask. I'm masking out some of the brightness. So with this selected, I can go to the eyeball tool and I can hide it and show you everything that that mask is doing. I can come here and I can disable layer mask by right-clicking so you can see what the mask itself is doing. All right, so now you can start to see how masks can determine what portion of an image is being affected by what you're doing. So let's say on this image, let's say I've got too much saturation. So I'm gonna go to a Vibrance Saturation layer, and let me just drop the full saturation of everything down. Let's go about right there. Okay, so let me just hide and show you. I guess I could just click there because I have one layer. What's happening? Okay, and let's also say that I want to darken around here. So let me bring up a brightness contrast. Let me darken everything down. All right, so if I want to have that hand not be dark, but I want everything else to be a little bit darker, I bring up my brush tool. What I'm going to do is on my brightness contrast, so make sure that's selected, make sure the layer is selected, because again, I can click off of the layer, make sure the layer is selected, and make sure the layer mask is selected. I can start to paint back in, and again, I'm at 20%. I've got a soft brush. I can start to paint back in the hand. And what I'm doing now is I'm drawing your eye to exactly where I want it to be, because I'm darkening the other areas and just bringing up the lightness of the hand and the ring. Okay, and our eye in an image generally will go to the brightest or darkest point. And with this image being dark, it's going to go to that ring or the brightest point. I can do the same thing with my vibrance, and I could start to bring back the vibrance of the hand, the tones of the hand, and just start to bring that back. Okay, so can you see what's happening here? I now have gone from this image to this image by creating a vibrance layer, selectively choosing what I want to have vibrant, and a brightness layer, and selectively choosing what I want to have darker and brighter. So hopefully you're starting to see what these layers, the power that can be had with adjustment layers and what they can do. Now the next thing, and the last thing I want to do, and it's important with layer masks, is I'm going to create a new document. And I'm going to create it, it's going to be a 10 by 10 at 300 dpi document. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a collage. And so if I take this image, and I'm going to delete my layers, and I bring it over onto here. Now I want to shrink it down, so I'm going to use the transform tool, which is a Command or a Control T. Okay, I'm going to shrink this image, and I'm going to maybe put it right there. Okay. Let's see what other one. Let's put the shoe. Let's say I'm creating a collage for a couple for their engagements. Something they can display at their wedding. All right, I'm going to put this one. Let's go right there. Okay. And let's say this is the fine couple right here. And I'm going to put this one right. Let's put it right there. Slide it over. Okay, but I want it to be below the rings. So what I can do is just take my rings and move it up. Okay. Now, I've got a little bit of a problem with that showing right there. So if I just take it and make it a little bit bigger, no more problem. Although, you know what? I'm probably going to want to line these up. If it's a collage, I want this to look good. So I'm going to line those up. So I zoomed in to do that. And if you remember, without going to the zoom tool, if you hold down the Command and space bar, you can zoom in and out really easily. Okay, so then I've got my last little image right there. Let's see. Let's have it be this one, this forever. So I'm going to drag this on there, transform, shrink it down, shrink. I can't go too small, otherwise it won't be hidden. All right, so let's try it right there, but I want it to be below the feet. So let me drag it down right to there, and let me slide it over. Okay, so this is a little collage. I'm going to make it a full screen. So if you hit the F key, you make it full screen so you can hide everything else. This is a collage I'm creating for a client. Now, there's a couple of options. I could have gone through and color corrected all of these images and then moved them over here. But one thing I do, let's say I'm creating a wedding album. I don't want to color correct every image on the wedding album before I let them see it. Otherwise, if they make a change to the image, I've got to go back and recolor correct them. So I want to color correct them each on this collage. Now, if I went to the top and let's say I wanted to brighten up this image. If I went up here and I created a brightness adjustment layer and I went here to brightness, you'll notice it's brightening everything up. So that's a problem. So let's say I just drug it right to here so it's only above this layer right here. That's still a problem because it's still brightening all of the layers below it. What I want to do is I want to link it to whichever layer I want to brighten. So let's go to the shoes layer. Okay. I want to brighten only this layer. And how you link layers together is you hold down the Option or the Alt key on a PC. And you'll notice as I hover between the two layers, I have this little square and this arrow appear. And what that's telling me is that it's linking this adjustment layer only to this layer right here. So you'll see this little arrow pointing down, which means as I adjust now, the only layer being affected is my shoes. Now that tool right there, that little tip right there is worth everything you've watched in this whole video. I use that all the time. And as you become more proficient in Photoshop and use it for more things, collages for clients, wedding albums, all of these things, this allows you to adjust specific images without adjusting the other images in your collage or on your wedding album page. So that is a powerful tool right there that I want you to remember. You can unlink by doing the same thing. Click, click. Option, Alt, click is what you do to unlink or relink layers together. Okay, so let me just really quickly go through here. All right, right there. All right, and I can still make adjustments with this. So if I go to my brush tool, I want to have it at 20%. I want to brush on black, shrink down my brush size, and you can now see that I am darkening just like I did in that other image. Okay, this image right here of the hand, let's click on it. I am going to create a saturation layer. I am going to link it, and then I am going to drop down my saturation Remember, we did that. I am also going to create a brightness contrast layer. Now, something to know is if I know I'm in the right place in my layers, if I hold down the Option or the Alt key when I click on the layer, it brings up this dialog box. And what you can do is you can click into this box, use previous layer to create clipping mask. If I click right there, I have now linked these layers together. Now it's not linking to this other adjustment layer, it's linking to the main layer. So that is another way to create these where they're linked together. So I can drop my brightness. And then the same thing is I can go in here with my brush. Okay, and I want to paint in my black to bring back the brightness on the hand and bring back the vibrance on the hand. And I could continue to do this until I get it just where I want it. Okay, just like that. And then on this layer, let me go down to this one right here, and you can select a layer by right-clicking on it, selecting it. There's my forever. I want to decrease my contrast, remember, so I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key. I'm going to click that little checkbox, hit OK. It's now created a brightness contrast layer, and I'm going to drop my contrast right there. Okay, in this image we could choose what do we want to do with this? Probably warm it up. This image probably doesn't have good color balance to it, so I'm going to select the color balance. I didn't link it, so I'm going to link it right there. And let's just warm up this image. Add a little more yellow right there. Okay, so I've created this collage, and within this collage, I have now edited every single image very, very specifically. And this is a powerful way in which you can really adjust images and adjust layouts of lots of different images without affecting everything else, is by doing adjustment layers, but then also linking them together. And if I came back, if I was to save this image and come back, I can make an adjustment, change anything that I don't like. Let's say, for example, I dropped the vibrance too much. I could simply come in here and drop the opacity of my vibrance layer, adjustment layer, and it brings back the vibrance on everything. Let's say I don't like this darkness down here. Let's say I don't like what I did. I can go back to my brush tool. Okay. I could paint white back on, go to 100% opacity, and I could get rid of what I've done. So hopefully you see the power of adjustment layers. Hopefully you see the power of masks. And hopefully you've learned that as you link these layers together, adjustment layers together, you have the ability to affect or change specific portions of your image with the ability to go back at any time and fix those changes. I'm so glad you joined me for this video. Hopefully you've learned a ton. If you have additional questions, ask them in the comments or in the notes below so that I can answer those for you. I truly want you to learn Photoshop. And again, I'm using Photoshop CC 2019. So if you're not up to that version, I would really suggest you get there by upgrading. But please subscribe to my channel. Also, you can check out my website at photographyhero.com where all of this and many more opportunities to learn are found. Again, I'm Kelly, and I'm so glad you're here. Thanks. Bye-bye.